तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं शरवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गणन्ति भूरिजना. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We are on the chapter Festival at Surendra's house. It's Friday, June 20th, 1884, page 457. It was dusk. Sri Ramakrishna was sitting in his room, absorbed in contemplation of the Divine Mother. Now and then he was chanting her name. Rakhal, Adhar, M, and several other devotees were with him. After a while, the evening worship began in the temples. Adhar left the room to see the worship. Sri Ramakrishna and M conversed. Master, tell me, does Baburam intend to continue his studies? I said to him, continue your studies to set an example to others. Baburam, of course, is the future Swami Premananda. And Sri Ramakrishna, he's not very convincing when he tells us that he was trying to get him to continue his studies. He wasn't very unhappy when he found out that he wasn't going to continue his studies, but he didn't want to force him. He wanted it to be his decision. And he was concerned about the family, not so much because they were so much opposed, but because they were a close family of devotees, his mother especially. In some of the other cases, he knew that some of the boys who came even would get beatings for coming to him and everything. So he's telling him, continue your studies. I said to him, continue your studies to set an example to others, but he'll be very, very happy if and when he comes to stay with him, because we know that when Sri Ramakrishna went into spiritual moods, that not everybody he couldn't bear the touch of anybody and everybody. And he was in such a state during this period that only this Baburam was considered pure enough. Not that he calculated, but he was the one that could always help Sri Ramakrishna, hold him up in samadhi and everything, without any chance of any reaction. It's remarkable. Even above Niranjan and Rakhal and the others, the Thakur felt that he was the purest soul of all of them. Remarkable. So I said to him, continue your studies to set an example to others. After Sita had been set free, Vibhishana refused to become king of Ceylon. Rama said to him, you should become king to open the eyes of the ignorant. Otherwise, they will ask you what you have gained as a result of serving me. They will be pleased to see you acquire the kingdom. I noticed the other day that Baburam, Bhavanath, and Harish have a feminine nature. In a vision, I saw Baburam as a goddess with a necklace around her neck and with woman companions about her. He has received something in a dream. His body is pure. Only a very little effort will awaken his spiritual consciousness. Now, what this exactly means, a feminine nature, this, of course, is from a spiritual point of view with regard to their spiritual attitude. And Sri Ramakrishna had this understanding that they belong to a certain, he would say, ghor, a certain room. They came from a certain region, spiritual region, that we very hard for us to exactly understand. But to those who, and to a large extent, it had to do with whether they were following the path of devotion or the path of knowledge. Those who followed the path of devotion uh, very often would fall into the camp of this feminine, feminine nature. Swamiji, of course, would be the masculine type. So some of it, it wasn't a gender type of thing. It was a spiritual attitude. Now take Sri Ramakrishna. What was his main spiritual attitude? Child of the Divine Mother. Now, where will he place himself? We can't place him anywhere because he he fit into he practiced he was comfortable in every possible situation. But if we want to follow this type of thinking, then most of the time he thought of himself as a child. And this mother, worshippers of the Divine Mother, is generally a mother-son relationship. It generally doesn't have to be, of course. Uh, but Sri Ramakrishna practiced all different relationships where he thought of himself as female, as male, and beyond both. So, yeah.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he had a feminine nature of taking others' attitude in him.
Yeah, Chaitanya Deva, according to their scriptures, he practiced all of the bhavas. So that means that he wasn't simply this Madhur Bhava, where one thinks of himself as a female companion, as identifies with the gopis or Radha to worship Krishna. According to them, he practiced all of them, but that would be probably the dominant mood for him. Uh, Sri Ramakrishna almost didn't have a dominant mood. He mostly this looking upon God as mother, but he was so comfortable with all of the other traditions that we can't pigeonhole him in any way, really. Yeah. But I think because his Baburam especially had a very soft nature and was very loving, but could be very tough and severe and stern to especially to the young monks who joined at Bellarmine. He could be a taskmaster that way. So it's a little hard to quite understand exactly how Sri Ramakrishna made these different types of distinctions. We can see easily with Narendra, even physically strong. His Baburam, a little bit slight, thin and everything. And Niranjan, of course, big and strong, uh, and, fiery type and everything. So yeah, it had to do a little bit with the traits that we tend to identify as female and male. Some, of course, are stereotypes that don't work anymore, but this seems to be what he meant at this time.
Swami, I have a question.
Yeah,
What's the relevance of the Vibhishana example here?
the relevance of
The Vibhishana example.
oh, that for other people, other ordinary people, to think that oh, this is Bhavishana, he was a worshiper of Raman. What is he doing now? He's just retired the far. He's nobody and he's nothing. More to attract people who aren't exactly spiritual people yet. This was the same technique that we find with uh, Chaitanya Deva and Nityananda, telling people, "Come, you'll get this Magaramacha jhol, this nice food and embrace of a young woman." They come because of that. It's kind of advertising, and then they realize that this fish stew and tears that are coming down. Juboti mayor cold. You'll get the embrace of a young man. It means they'll roll on the ground. He uses that example in ecstasy that way. So it's a half. He's not very serious with all of this. If he really thought it was important for Baburam to set an example to others, you can be a very good disciple and still finish your studies and have a good job and everything. He would have encouraged them, but he doesn't. So that's why I say uh, he's presenting an argument to him that's a legitimate argument, half hoping, in my mind, or completely hoping, or maybe knowing that he won't buy it. That he's going to say, "Okay, let others do that." So this is actually Sri Ramakrishna is quoting himself. This is what I told him. I told him to continue the studies and everything, and then I gave this example, Vibhishana and everything. But really, he's overjoyed when Baburam decides to renounce the world, not continue his studies, not get married and everything. Yeah. So, anybody else? Any other explanation for that? So about this Baburam, he has received something in a dream. His body is pure. Only a very little effort will awaken his spiritual consciousness. Now he'll give this real reason. You see, I'm having some difficulty about my physical needs. It will be nice if Baburam lives with me. See how he puts it? Yeah. I'm not pushing him in that direction. I'm giving him all the arguments. I'm giving him every chance not to do it, to continue his studies and everything. But if he decides he wants to stay here, it'll be nice. That means he'll be very, very happy. And of course, this is all kind of a game. He knows when these direct disciples come, especially these few that he called Ishwarakotis. He knows that they're not cut out for worldly life. He knows that this is he's going to end up leading a life of a monk and everything. So a little bit part of this lila, we can say. The nature of these attendants of mind is undergoing a change. Latu is always tense with spiritual emotion. He is about to merge himself in God. Rakhal is getting into such a spiritual mood that he can't do anything even for himself. I have to get water for him. He isn't of much service to me. Now, it may sound a little bit selfish. He wants his Baburam to come because his other two attendants are not doing much for him. But really, he loves this Baburam, and he knows that he can really have the highest type of realization in a very short time by living with him. Yeah. So he knows he has such reliance on the Divine Mother, he's not going to worry about these things. But still, it would be nice. I like the way he puts it. It would be nice if he stays. Latu, of course, was the first, and just the orphan boy who lived with Ramchandra Datta and who ended up staying there. And Rakhal, see, Sri Ramakrishna is complaining about him. But every time Rakhal went into a spiritual mood, Sri Ramakrishna was overjoyed. In fact, he would always point to the spot. This is where Rakhal was sitting when he had his first experience of Bhava. So he was overjoyed. He's pretending that how annoying it is. My attendants can't do anything. They're going into ecstasy all the time. But he's happy, of course. Yeah. Among the youngsters, Baburam and Niranjan are rather exceptional. See, these are two of opposite natures. One will be of this feminine type, Niranjan, very masculine type. But Sri Ramakrishna doesn't, his way of making these distinctions is based on a different type of understanding, what their spiritual attitude is. If other boys come in the future, they will, it seems to me, receive instruction and then go away. Now, Purna has already come at this time. He used to say, see, Sri Ramakrishna, he found tremendous meaning in names. In names. So he would say this Niranjan is perfectly pure. And Rakhal as a companion of Sri Krishna. So when Purna came, he said, this completes the circle. Yeah. So he's saying after Baburam and Niranjan, he could also add Purna, whom he considered to be also an Ishwarakoti. But I don't want Baburam to tear himself away from his family. It may make trouble at home. Smiling. When I ask him, why don't you come? He says, why not make me come? He looks at Rakhal and weeps. He says, Rakhal is very happy here. See, they felt such a tremendous joy in the presence of Sri Ramakrishna. It's such an attraction that they all wanted to stay there. And so many times they would go and it would get dark and they would just spend the night there. Parents wouldn't know where they were. They'd show up the next morning and get a good scolding and everything. They were young, many of them, but they really. M said, and also Swami Turiyananda, uh, I'm sure they all felt it, but the moment that we left Sri Ramakrishna, the only thought in our minds was, when will we get to go back and see him again? So Baburam was so envious of Rakhal because he could stay there. Not that he stayed all of the time. Sometimes he went back to his family and everything, but at that time he was living there. Rakhal now lives here as one of the family. I know that he will never again be attached to the world. He says that worldly enjoyments have become tasteless to him. His wife came here on her way to Konagar. That was where the family house was. She is 14. He too was asked to go to Konagar, but he didn't go. He said, I don't like merriment and gaiety. This is something that's not easy for us to understand, how Sri Ramakrishna was not very concerned that he got married. He even sent him back to his wife. He even said, I hear that she's expecting a child now. Didn't seem to concern him so much. And he knew that this Rakhal, he knew his future and everything. And in those days of joined families, it was a little bit different. We think of abandon a wife with a child and everything, but a little bit different. And with the direct disciples, this is one thing that we can notice, is that it was very much different from the traditional Orthodox wandering sadhu of that time, who would leave home and wouldn't see the family for maybe after 12 years they could come back. Here, it's almost as if the wife still felt she was the wife of the husband. And we see with Yogin, Swami Yogananda, how Holy Mother insisted to let the wife come and nurse him at the very end and everything. So they, with a little bit of different type of understanding. Otherwise, very traditionally, the wife is like a widow. Husband is dead to her. She doesn't see him, and some they'll even have to dress like that and everything. But somehow it doesn't seem the case with the direct disciples. What do you think of Niranjan? He's talking to M now. M, he's very handsome. He was big and strong and handsome, and yeah, a wonderful figure. We see even his picture, we see strong, good posture and everything. He used to go around with a big staff and everything. M, he is very handsome. Master, no, I'm not asking about his looks. He is guileless. One can easily realize God if one is free from guile. Spiritual instruction produces quick results in a guileless heart. Such a heart is like well-cultivated land from which all the stones have been removed. No sooner is the seed sown than it germinates. The fruit also appears quickly. Now, guileless. This is a tough one because we have to just be born that way. There's some people who are just guileless. They're a little simple and trusting and not complicated people. They don't overanalyze things. Somebody says something, they accept it. It's for more for village people, I think, not for sophisticated people. And we can say that, yeah, it'd be nice if we were guileless. Thakur says how wonderful it is, but I think it's too late for, for most of us. That either you have it, and we see some kids especially are just like very simple and everything. I was remembering something that I heard from our Swami Gautamanandaji. He was talking about he worked with the tribal children at one time, about how guileless, how simple they were. And he thought one day, let me teach them to never tell a lie. So he started telling them, and then one of them said, what is it? What is this telling a lie? What does that mean? And he said, if something happens and you say it didn't happen, or you did something, you say you didn't do it, that's telling a lie. You should never do it. And the children were confused. They said, if it didn't happen, why would we say it happened? They couldn't get the concept of telling a lie. Now we can't imagine that. But that's what it means to be guileless. And Thakur thought that was so wonderful. He himself was guileless. He was so simple that so many examples he gives. That one nice example when he felt something that pinched him. I thought could have been a snake bite. And somebody had told him that if you get bitten by the snake a second time, then it'll remove the venom that it injected the first time. So he's lying outside in some area. Somebody says, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I think I may have been bit by a snake. So I'm waiting to see if it'll bite me again." That person said, "It has to be exactly the same place." He said, "Oh, then forget it." But he tells all these stories. He makes fun of himself almost, how guileless he was. The one time, who was it? Hazra or Rita, one of them said, "Oh, if you stick your head out the window in the carriage and this cool night air and everything, it'll be very good for you." He said, "So I did it. I caught a cold." But very simple. Whatever the doctor said, he would follow. He had more faith in them than anybody. So this, if we have it, if we're guileless, the grace of God. Otherwise, I don't know how people become guileless. We try to practice truthfulness and sincerity and everything, but this real guileless thing, even among the direct disciples, Sri Ramakrishna is only pointing out these two here, at least. He's mentioned, especially with these two. Niranjan will not marry. He said at a very young age, he told his parents, "I won't get married." Some of them looked upon that as a high ideal. It is lust and gold that causes entanglement. Isn't that so? Now, poor M, what's M going to say? He's married. He's M, yes, sir, master. What will one gain by renouncing betel leaf and tobacco? The real renunciation is the renunciation of lust and gold. I came to know in an ecstatic mood that though Niranjan had accepted a job in an office, he would not be stained by it. He is earning money for his mother. There is no harm in that. Now, these are confusing things for many people. Why was Thakur so much against people having a job and working and earning money? It seems like, everybody has to do that. It was only these who were destined to become the future monastic members of the order and who lived in a joint family and didn't have to work. If they were working, it meant that they had some desire for some money to buy things and everything. It was different, of course, in Narendra's case, when the family was starving. He had to look for a job. And now this Niranjan, because probably his father died also. And because it talks about his widowed mother, he did it for her. So then it was okay. Then we'll hear about doctors and lawyers also. So Sri Ramakrishna had his own understanding of things because he had such perfect dependence on the Divine Mother that even this idea that, no, I have to worry about my future. I have to have a job. I have to save money. He said for householders, it's okay. But for his chosen ones, the future monastic members, he said one time, I would have rather heard that Rakhal had passed away than that he had taken up a job, taken up service. That means putting yourself, under service in those days was some very, very bureaucratic type of thing with a boss who orders you around like a servant and everything. He is earning money, Niranjan. He is earning money for his mother. There is no harm in that. The work you are doing won't injure you either. This is the M. And he was teaching, headmaster in the school. What you are doing is good. Suppose a clerk is sent to jail. He is shut up there and chained, and at last he is released. Does he cut capers after his release? Of course not. He works again as a clerk. It is not your intention to accumulate money. You only want to support your family. Otherwise, where will they go? So that means that uh, he can have this highest type of realization even while he's doing his job, and then afterwards uh, he can do it or not do it. He's not attached to anything like that. This is a common theme in the Zen literature. Uh, we One famous Zen master, he said, before enlightenment, I carried water and chopped wood. After enlightenment, I carry water and chop wood. That means that it's all within the mind. It's all within the heart or the mind that experience what we do externally. There'll be no possibility of attachment or anything, and no reason to change, to do something radically different, unless, of course, circumstances may dictate that. But just in general, that everything will be internal, radical internal type of transformation. But externally, what we do won't matter. Even Sri Krishna, he says, "Look, I'm Lord of the three worlds. I can do no harm if I don't do anything. If I continue to work, no harm also. I'm not attached to anything. Let's set an example for others." M. I shall be relieved as someone takes charge of them. That means of his duties. Now, M was always conflicted. Throughout the gospel, we find two things. One, this conflict with his family, whether to live at home and go back to with his father and everything, or live on his own. And this other tremendous conflict about monastic life or family life, social life. And Sri Ramakrishna uh, never encouraged him. Of course, he had his family, he had his obligations, he had his duties, but Sri Ramakrishna understood that M was to represent a different type of example. Sometimes we hear this term grihi sannyasi, that living in the setting of a householder, but really with the mindset of a sannyasi. So this was M's fate, we can say, or his karma, that he was never able to really fulfill that desire to renounce everything. He would have loved to have just moved into Baranagomat with the others and lived like that, but maybe he couldn't. Maybe his karma would have drawn him out. Maybe Thakur saw something there. So M says, I shall be relieved as someone takes charge of them. Master, that is true. But now do this as well as that. So do your worldly duties and at the same time call on God. M, it is great luck to be able to renounce everything. What is it? You have the Bengali there? There's no real word for luck. It should be like good fortune or something. Yeah. Anyhow, it is great luck to be able to, we take it as grace to be able to renounce everything. Master, that is true, but people act according to their inherent tendencies, samskaras, and past karma. And we may have tremendous desire to renounce everything, but there'll be something holding us back, something pulling us, some little karma there, some samskaras. You have a few more duties to perform. So that means that some karma is still left. So that it has to be this bhoganta. We've seen this term so many times. It has to be enjoyed. It has to be fulfilled. After these are over, you will have peace. Then you will be released. A man cannot easily get out of the hospital once his name is registered there. So once we're born, and once we have all these, there's a karma that we have to get rid of, and these enjoyments that we have to fulfill and everything, we won't get released until we've done all of that. He is discharged only when he is completely cured. The devotees who come here may be divided into two groups. Now, this will be a different division. We had that other Purush and Prakriti. Now we'll have a different division. One group says, and it's not monastic and non-monastic. It's not that distinction. One group says, "Oh God, give me liberation." Another group belonging to the inner circle doesn't talk that way. So this is antaranga and bahiranga, the inner circle and the outer circle. And the inner circle will be all the monastic devotees and the close householder devotees also. Sri Ramakrishna uses this language very often. These are common terms. Bahiranga. He talks about the elephant. He has the tusks outside that put on a big show and everything, but the inner teeth are the ones that do the actual chewing. They're the antarangas, or the pillars in the Natmandir. Some of them are just for show. The others are really supporting the whole thing. So he makes these types of distinctions. So the devotees who come here may be divided into two groups. One group says, "Oh God, give me liberation." Another group, belonging to the inner circle, doesn't talk that way. They are satisfied if they can know two things. First, who I am. Second, who they are and what their relationship to me is. You belong to the second group. Otherwise, ... You have it there. Yeah. And they also dots. Dot. Yeah, so that means that M doesn't want to reveal what Sri Ramakrishna said to him. Now, Thakur talks this way. There was another interesting conversation when somebody asked, "Will all of your disciples attain liberation?" Now, what would we expect? We expect yes. He said, "No, not those who came with me. They'll have to come again also." And the Holy Mother also. There's a beautiful conversation with is Rasbihai Maharaj, Swami Rupananda. A beautiful conversation where he says to her, "Mother, I won liberation. I don't want to come back again." She says, "Sorry, you have to come back when I come back. I don't want to." He said, "You have no choice. Whenever I come, you'll come again." So this was the real inner circle. That means they're part of the companions of his Leela. Leela Sahajari. It's a very hard to understand all of these things, but he wanted them to know that they were part of this play, this divine play, and they had part of this fulfilling a divine mission in life. So Swamiji, of course, understood it very well. That it was a tremendous burden that he had his whole life to carry this teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, and they all had that understanding. And Swamiji actually wanted his disciples and the future monastics of the order to also not care much for their own liberation, to care more about serving others, to leading a life of perfect dedication. He said, then, if you run after mukti, you'll go to hell. If you don't care for mukti, mukti will run after you and catch hold of you. So there is no question that they were sacrificing their own spiritual future by serving others. It was actually helping, but he didn't like, and Sri Ramakrishna also didn't like that selfish type of attitude. He always talked about the ancient rishis. Let me attain liberation, and don't let anything come that will disturb my mind and distract me or anything. They would leave early morning, leave the ashram and everything. So he talked like that. But this is really, these are those type of statements that are really mystical statements, that they only have to know two things: who I am, that means avatar, and who they are, that means companions of the avatar who come along with him and have a role to play in this Leela. It all has to go back to this idea of this divine play. So he's telling him, you belong to the second group. Otherwise, now very often, Thakur will say, otherwise, why did they come so often? Or otherwise, why did they show me such respect? Or otherwise, but we don't know exactly what he's saying here. But anyhow, it'll probably be something complementary to M that he's not going to tell us. Then he'll go back to this earlier theme. Bhavanat, Baburam, and a few others have a feminine nature. Hari sleeps in a woman's cloth. Baburam says that he too likes the womanly attitude, so I am right. Bhavanat also is like that, but Narendra, Rakhal, and Niranjan have a masculine nature. Now, what I said before is also not 100% true. It's because Rakhal, Sri Ramakrishna said, had the nature of a bhakta, and Narendra Vijnani, although he said Narendra also had a devotional side, but he had different distinctions, and they didn't always fall in opposite camps. With this Purusha and Prakriti, they're both in the same camp. The Bhakti and Jnana in different camps. He had his own way of understanding these things. Please tell me one thing. What is the significance of my having hurt my arm? Once my teeth were broken while I was in a state of ecstasy. It is the arm this time. Now, Thakur talks about this at least, I don't know, at least half a dozen times. What's the significance of his breaking his arm? But this time he'll give a different answer. I don't know why. It's curious. Seeing him silent, the master himself continued the conversation. My arm was broken in order to destroy my ego to its very root. Now, what ego did Thakur have? But generally, we know, he says, mother was trying to tell me that don't see God in this state of ecstasy. That's how we fell. See God dwelling in all beings, not a lila. That's the usual explanation that we get, and we get it several different times. But here, for some reason, he gives us other type of explanation. What ego did he have? Is again one of these statements that are not very easy to understand. He said, "Now I cannot find my ego within myself anymore." So Sri Ramakrishna went through these different spiritual changes at different times. Even simple things like being able to touch metal. It wasn't like his whole life he couldn't touch it. He went through a little phase there. He had them buy the stone dishes and things like that. And so he would go through different phases at different times. At one time, he could take food from anybody and everybody. Another time, it had to be cooked by a Brahmin of pure character. So he went through these different stages and different phases. Towards the end, really, it was seeing God dwelling within all the beings. That this Nada Lila became very prominent. And even towards the end, everything merging into this formless absolute, infinite absolute. This happened, they say, in the life of Ram Prasad. That at the very end, this Divine Mother, he was seeing her as this infinite absolute, formless reality. So approaching the end of his life also, being ready to merge back into that from where he came, his mood started to change a little bit. When I searched for it, I see God alone. Now, this is something that Thakur says we can all do. If we look for that eye, you'll find God in its place. If we analyze, we peel the onion and everything, trying to find the ego inside, we won't find it. But this was the reality that he lived in. It wasn't an analysis or anything with him. Now I cannot find my ego within myself anymore. When I search for it, I see God alone. One can never attain God without completely getting rid of the ego. Now, Thakur says this, but he also says that one can never completely get rid of the ego. So we have to understand this to be that unripe ego, that ego that's identified with the body, with the personality, with all of our superficial things, whatever our career is, whatever our ethnicity is, and all of those things. We take help of this ripe ego, this relationship ego, in order to counteract that one. And that also has to go. So that'll be going beyond sattva to this pure sattva. But that's the final stage. That'll have to go. So let me start this over. My arm was broken in order to destroy my ego to its very root. Now I cannot find my ego within myself anymore. When I search for it, I see God alone. Other times, he says, even in Kashipur, sometimes I look, I see two are there, mother and her child. Sometimes I see mother alone is there. So depending on how high a mood he's in. One can never attain God without completely getting rid of the ego. You must have noticed that the chatak bird has its nest on the ground, but soars up very high. Captain says, now this captain, this is, what's his name? Vishwanath Upadhyay. He had some high government position in Nepal. And was a little orthodox, kind of orthodox Hindu, you could say, in his ways. Captain says, I haven't acquired any occult powers because I eat fish. I tremble with fear lest I should acquire those powers. If I should have them, then this place would be turned into a hospital or a dispensary. People would flock here and ask me to cure their illness. Is it good to have occult powers? This captain was highly respectful of Sri Ramakrishna and appreciative and loved him and everything, but also tried to correct him and sometimes like we didn't like the fact that he went to see Keshav. Why do you go to see him and everything? Little things that he thought that he can give some advice to Sri Ramakrishna that'll be helpful for him. Well-meaning, but didn't quite understand who he was talking to at the time. So is it good to have occult powers? M. No, sir. You have said to us that a man cannot realize God if he possesses even one of the 8 occult powers. Occult powers, it means that we have some identification with his body, and then with the ego, and then some pride comes, and all sorts of things come. But these powers belong to the body and the mind. And if I feel that I have them, that means that I'm identified with the body and mind. That means ignorance and bondage. Master, right you are. Only the small-minded seek them. If one asks something of a rich man, one no longer receives any favor from him. There's another favorite example of Sri Ramakrishna, that we pray to God for things. We may get them, and the next time he may say, oh, this fellow's praying again. I just gave him something. Of course, God is not like that, but he gives that example, that if the servant goes to the king and doesn't ask for anything, king will be very pleased. If he's always asking for things, then half the time he'll say, no, I'm busy today, come back tomorrow. If one asks something of a rich man, one no longer receives any favor from him. The rich man doesn't allow such a person to ride in the same carriage with him. Even if he does, he doesn't allow the man to sit near him. Now, this is not a perfect analogy for God, of course, but he's trying to make this point that we shouldn't be seeking things. Therefore, love without any selfish motive is the best. And this goes for seeking material things and siddhis. He's talking about these occult powers. God with form and the formless God are both equally true. Now, all of a sudden, he'll start with some very high philosophical idea. What do you say? Now, he's asking M because in the beginning, when he asked M, what do you believe in? He said, I believe in formless. And when he said, well, what about form? He said, no, you have to tell these people. Form, you're talking about the image in the temple. You have to tell these people that that's not God. And they got a big scolding. So M's been through all of this with Sri Ramakrishna before. Now, formless God, we all know what it means without knowing anything about it. We know that it simply means that God doesn't have 2 eyes and a nose and a mouth, or even 8 arms or 10 arms. That this is a conception that we have in Puranas and other literature and everything. But when we think of God, that's consciousness. Consciousness won't have form. We're scientific modern people. Consciousness, it means something that is transcendent and beyond. We can all talk like that. God with form is the conception that most people have unconsciously, even as kids. If we tried to think, who is this God that they keep talking about? Old man with a white beard. Huh? So the vision comes into that, some type of something like that. If we're sitting on a throne, if we're asked, why doesn't the throne, where is it? In heaven. It's sitting on a cloud. It's a heavy throne. Why doesn't it fall through the cloud and come to the earth? We say, I didn't think about that. So these are not rational conceptions that we have. Sri Ramakrishna, he makes everything so rational that this blend of objective and subjective is very interesting. And in the Vedantic tradition, I was thinking about this afternoon. The Vedantic tradition, we so many different ways of understanding this God with form or personal God. That the Advaitins will say that this is just some delusion, some just pure imaginary type of thing, that you want to think of God in a certain way because you like it, that's it. There's no ultimate reality to it. Then we'll get some little in-between thing that, yes, it's some subjectivity is there, but it's objectively true. So that block of ice, yeah, it is a block of ice, and it has a certain form, but the form is according to your liking, and it can melt back. And so we'll have something we can say this is like kalpana, some type of superimposing some idea that we conception, some conceptual idea of God. And then we'll have those that will say that no, the form is also real. And well, others will say real but temporary, that and not absolute. And then there'll be the real dualists who say, no, this is 100% real, and this is the only one that's real. And then we get quarrels. So you have a big gamut and hierarchy range of different ways to understand this idea of personal God and God with form. For Sri Ramakrishna, he allows all of these because he doesn't have that conception that we have. We want to say, well, which one is true? He doesn't look at it that way. He said there are spiritual attitudes. For the dualist, yes, you can believe that it's entirely true, but don't think that other people's conception is wrong. He'll put that little footnote there. But yeah, you can think it's perfectly true. If you're a little bit more of a deep thinker, then try to feel that it's cooling power of your heart, your devotion, that gives it that particular form. The sun will come and it'll melt back into the ocean. But even then, it's nothing but water. Same thing as the ocean. Or it's just a wave on the ocean. It has no ultimate, even less reality than a block of ice. They're all very good, legitimate ways of trying to understand this idea of the personal God, with this other understanding that this is a spiritual attitude. And this is, I think, one of the most important contributions of Sri Ramakrishna, that none of these things, none of these different schools of thought represent truth. They represent a path. They represent an attitude. That's why he says, "Mot pot." Yeah, that these different doctrines, they're not the truth. They're a path. that there are ways to help us. So they're all different spiritual attitudes that we have. So equally true. Now, how can we say God with form and formless God are equally true? Because even formless God is a conception that we have until we have that realization. Even that's a conception. We say, I am that. It's also a type of conception. I have some idea of myself, I. I have, that's also a relationship, a non-relational relationship, but still. So both equally true, but for him, the ultimate truth is the experience. Is the experience. Yeah. And that can't be put into words. We fumble around with trying to explain it and everything. It's helpful, but the experience of it goes far beyond anything that we can say about it. Thakur says that over and over again. So God with form and the formless God are both equally true. What do you say? Again, testing him a little bit. One cannot keep one's mind on the formless God a long time because the mind needs something tangible. Formless God, half the time we need some symbolic type of thing. Yeah. If we just try to, what do? Try to imagine empty space or something. How long can the mind do that? That is why God assumes form for his devotees. Now, the one thing that I failed to mention with his personal God, with the avatar, and now this is different. This is at least the modern avatars, at least Buddha, Chaitanya Dev, Christ, Sri Ramakrishna, that we know that they actually existed and lived independently of our understanding of them. Rama and Krishna, they're legendary. We assume that they were figures like that, but we don't have exactly what they did and exactly their words the same way. But any of what we consider these avatars, they have some real objective existence. Now, we also have our understanding. We also superimpose according to the ability of our mind to understand them. We understand them to that extent. So now he's saying that even beyond having to come up with some conception of God, say, what is my conception? Oh, I think God is kind. God is loving. I think of God as woman. Does that mean I think of physical features? No, I'm thinking God has all the qualities of a loving mother, something like that. The avatar, we don't have to do all of that. We see it. It's there before us. And Swamiji, this is one of my favorite statements that Swamiji says, you try to imagine the greatest type of qualities that God could possibly have, love, compassion, this and that. And then you look at these great souls, and then you realize that even your conception, your guess of what the highest possible compassion will be, isn't as great as what they actually have, because it's limited by your own ability to be compassionate and loving and kind and everything. So they were so how they had such insight, huh? Beautiful things to say. So this is why God assumes form for his devotees. Captain makes a nice remark in this connection. He says that when a bird gets tired of soaring very high, it perches on a tree and rests. First is the formless God, and then comes God with form. Now, opposite can also be true. Opposite can be true. Sri Ramakrishna says, even those who worship God with form, Divine Mother once, they'll have that highest knowledge of Brahman. Everything will merge in this infinite absolute. The sun will melt the ice and it'll go back into the ocean. So that can also be true. But if we're talking about this jnana and vijnana, after having that highest realization, when the mind comes back down again, then again, there can be that relationship. If one has that temperament, that relationship, and that's how Sri Ramakrishna remains the child of the Divine Mother after Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Otherwise, he also could have been I am he, but goes back into that relationship. I shall have to go to your house once, talking to him. I saw in a vision that the houses of Adhar, Balaram, and Surendra were so many places for our foregathering. Adda. The little kind of clubhouses, places they can all get together. But it makes no difference to me whether they come here or not. A funny statement that he makes. That's right. Why shouldn't it be so? One must feel misery if one feels happiness, but you are beyond both. So, but Thakur did feel miserable if Narendra didn't come, Purna didn't come, and everything. But at the same time, his mind could just go above and beyond everything anytime. Master, yes. Further, I think of the magician and his magic. The magician alone is real. His magic is illusory, like a dream. I realized this when I heard the Chandi recited. Shumbha and Nishumbha were scarcely born when I learned that they both were dead. There's a footnote. Two demons mentioned in the Chandi who were killed by the Divine Mother. Yes, sir. Once I was going to Kalna with Gangadhar in a steamer. A country boat struck our ship and sank with 20 or 25 passengers. They all disappeared in the water like foam churned up by the steamer. Yeah, can you imagine that right in front of you, you're watching 25 people just disappear and drown in the ocean? Anyhow, talking about this dispassion and feeling of the transitory nature of the world, it comes when we think about death and people passing away, how quickly they go, and it gives us some sense that there's nothing to cling to, that we'll have to let go of everything sooner or later. Now, Em will ask a very, very important question here. May I ask you one thing? Does a man watching magic really feel compassion when he sees suffering in the performance? Does he feel at that time any sense of responsibility? One thinks of compassion only when one feels responsibility. Isn't that so? Now, this becomes a problem a little bit with this, what Swamiji calls undigested Vedanta. This is a very strict Advaita Vedanta that will say this world is illusory like a dream. Now, if it's illusory like a dream, then are we moved by the suffering of other people? If we see it in the theater or in a movie, we'll feel some compassion and everything, but not for the actor. Yeah, we know that the actor is just acting. If we really feel that this is just some type of puppet show, and the people who are the person, the puppeteer who's making everything happen, it's not affected at all by anything. Will we be affected by that? Where is room for our compassion? If we feel that everything is just unreal, just a passing show, just like a dream, something like that. It's an interesting question. And this was always a kind of criticism of Vedanta, that it led to a feeling of not caring for people so much. The monks would just go out on their own and everything. Swamiji, of course, reversed it completely, that whatever we say about anything, the indweller is real and experiencing everything. We have to see God in everything. But it's a very perceptive and interesting and important question for those who take very seriously this idea this world is illusory like a dream. Thakur didn't like that attitude especially, but so this is a very interesting question. So Thakur says, a jnani sees everything at once. So what does it mean, see everything at once? See all of the artificial fruit. We see apples and oranges and pears, but we know that we're seeing nothing but wax. Now, this is always a topic of debate among scholars when they talk about mysticism. Is it possible to see God in the world at the same time? Is it possible to see the snake and the rope at the same time? Now, logic will tell us either we see one or the other. And Sri Ramakrishna will tell us that one can see the name and the form and also know that it's nothing but gold. That was, well, of course, how we lived. Yeah, we can, if we want to look at it that way, or we can just say this name and form doesn't take away from the reality of the substance. So the unreality of the wave, transitory nature of the wave, it doesn't have anything really substantial to it. Doesn't take away from the fact that we're seeing the ocean when we see that. Anyhow, this his answer is interesting. Jnani sees everything at once: God, Maya, the universe. So both God, Maya, the universe, and living beings. He sees that Vidyamaya and Avidyamaya, the universe and all living beings exist and at the same time do not exist. That means that they don't have the same type of existence as this Brahman, pure consciousness. They exist for a time being. They exist. Does a wave exist? Yeah. I mean, we know the difference between ocean when it's calm and the ocean when there are waves. But if we try to analyze what is it actually, is it a thing? Is it just very for a moment, not even a moment? It never remains the same for a moment, the particular shape of the wave. But it has some type of reality. It's observable, experienceable. We all know what we mean when we talk about the wave. The example I like is the horizon. We all know what it means to see the horizon. Is there such a thing as a horizon? Will we actually be able to find that line? No, we can't find it. Yeah, it's just it has an apparent reality. So then he says, as long as he is conscious of I, he is conscious of others too. Nothing whatsoever exists after he cuts through the whole thing with the sword of jnana. Then even his I becomes as unreal as the magic of the magician. M was reflecting on these words when the master said, do you know what it is like? It is as if there were a flower with 25 layers of petals, and you cut them all with one stroke. There's another way of saying almost that we're going to peel the onion. We're not going to just even do it layer by layer by layer. We'll just chuck the whole thing. We know that there's nothing inside, that's just that infinite reality. Yeah.
When they say that Jnani sees everything at once, God, Maya, and the universe, does that mean the God with the form? Because you can't, if you see God without the form, then you don't see the Maya.
I think he's referring to the seeing this visible universe, and at the same time, somehow seeing it as Chinmaya. How it's done, I don't know. But I don't think he's talking right now about seeing God as personal and impersonal at the same time, or with form or without form. It's he's talking about when he says God. I think we have to take that as a Brahman, as consciousness, as that ultimate reality or ultimate ground, that pure consciousness, that ocean. Sees both the ocean and the waves, something like that. Okay, I thought we'd finish the chapter, but we'll stop here in the middle of page 460. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukam Bhatadavikraham Ishavataram Parameshamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Sirisanamam. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us.